Come along with me as we go through chapter 7 of Proverbs. Here we have Solomon warning his son against the lure of the adulterous woman. In verses 1 through 5, we see the warnings against lust as Solomon is reminding his son to, number 1, remember God's commands. Number 2, to live by it. Because he said it will be a defense to keep you from sin and temptation. Let's read verse 4 from the Message translation. Say to wisdom as to a sister, treat insight as your companion. They'll be with you to fend off the temptress, that smooth-talking, honey-tongued seductress. Solomon provided detailed explanation as to how this adulterous woman sought out her victims. He said that one day he was looking through the window and he saw a group of young men passing by. He knew that he would find one that would be a simple-minded young man, one that lacked understanding. Here it was at nightfall, and the young man was heading down the path to the adulteress' home, and out she came with her seductive clothing to tempt him. He described how provocative this woman was and how she was never at home because she was always in the streets. She came out and kissed the young man and spoke of how her bed was ready for him as she had filled her bed with nice-smelling spices and had changed to a beautiful linen on her bed. She invited the young man into her home and told him that her husband was not at home and he's not expected back until about a month. Before long, the young man was lured into her home by her seductive words and her gestures. Let's see what verses 22 and 23 has to say. Let's read. It says, all at once he followed her like an ox to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose. Little did he know that it would cost him his life. In the end, Solomon gave some words of wisdom to his son to serve as a reminder just to pay attention to what he says and to not let his heart go towards the adulterous ways. He said the adulteress has brought down many victims. He said her house is like a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. Let's wrap up chapter 7 of Proverbs. As you can see, Solomon's wisdom in this chapter, it could be from events that he's seen throughout his life, but definitely he is cautioning his son to not fall into this type of temptation. He said the adulteress was very aggressive and very cunning as she used her sweet words, her seductive clothing, and a kiss to convince the young man to come into her home. You see, when you are presented with a situation like this, the faster you move away from it by saying no, the more likely you are to not succumb to it. One important lesson to learn is that once you yield to sin, it becomes more and more difficult to get out of it. But with God's help and your willingness to yield to the Word of God, you can overcome it. So in other words, flee from lust to avoid falling into sexual temptation. That's all for now.